Alright, so this time in our third tutorial in Blender, we're going to look at making a bit more of a complex model that has a slightly more complex shape. So you can see the demo we're going to do today is a dog, but I'm going to get you to have a look at doing some different images. And when we're completely finished, it'll allow us to put some textures and colors on it, which we'll look at in our next tutorial. So, to begin with for this one, what we're actually going to start with is putting in a reference image. Now you'll see I've got some already completed models in my workspace, and that's purely because to save time and the length of the tutorial. So I'll click through them at different stages, but making sure I show you each step as I go. So putting in a reference image. So I'm going to insert this reference image into my scene. So I'm just going to turn everything else off so you can't see it, and I'm going to start with those two minimized, and I'm going to make this right click in this window up here and go new collection. And when I click on that, it means any mesh that I'm now adding or any object I'm now adding is added in this collection. So add a reference image, I go Shift A, or I can come up to add and image. And I'm going to go background. Now, this is the image which I'll share with you for this tutorial, and that's of the dog. So when I import that in, I can now select that in object mode. So I can select my dog, and you'll see it's imported it in, and by default it aligns the reference image with the camera, so the camera's position, which we don't really want because you can see at the moment it's on kind of an angle and it's not really in a great position. So we're going to scale it and reposition it. So to do that, we're going to bring up some properties. So to bring up the transform properties of the object, if I press on N on my keyboard, it brings out the transform option. So I'm going to go over here and change the rotation to suit what I want. So I'm going to set it up so that it is sitting perfectly on the X plane. So that will be 90 on the X plane, the Y plane should be 0 rotation, and Z should be 180. Now we want it so that when I change to the Y view, so if I click on Y in my color here, just the green Y, it takes me to side on, and it is exactly side on. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scale it to make it a bit bigger. So I'm just going to hit S and drag it out. Now you can see here, when I have those properties on, the scale has now become larger. So what I'm going to do, just to reset all these to that's now 1 and these will be 0, is I'm going to click on Control A and go rotation and scale. Control A, and I'm just going to go rotate. Control A and scale. So now it assumes scale is 0. So I've got this object in here. It's now set up on my plane, and I'm actually going to just move it up using the blue so that the feet are roughly on my red axis, because that's where I'm going to add my objects in. Alright, so my next step. So I'm going to work from this Y view, so I'm perfectly 2D and directly opposite. And I'm going to start modeling this dog here that is exactly side on. That's because we're going to use the two different profiles to model our dog today. So to start making my side profile, I'm going to, instead of starting with a cube this time, I'm going to start with a plane. So I'm going to go Shift A, Mesh, and Plane. Or if you're wanting to do it up here, you might go Add, Mesh, Plane. Now my plane is there, it's just on another axis. So again, if I have my transform window open, I want to rotate this to 90 degrees. And then it comes up exactly on my plane, like this. Now I'm going to move it up, and I'm actually going to scale it right down. So it's quite small, and by just moving the object, so you can see at the moment it's only changing the value in the X plane, and the Z plane, which it's representing, is up and down. I'm going to move it towards the tail of the dog and scale it down even further. So it fits inside the dog just like this. Now when we're doing this one, we want to be able to see our reference image. So I'm actually going to turn on, there's two options here, and you're going to use both of them at different times. So I'm going to turn on my wireframe and leave off the background. So I just get the outline of my object. So it's definitely there, it's sitting there, and I can see the outline. And now I'm going to start to edit my object. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and automatically it's on face select. I'm going to start editing this using edge and vertex select. So I'm going to start with vertex, and if I press B, that brings up my option to do a drag select. So I'm going to drag and select these two vertices at once, and I might scale those up. So I'm stretching them out a bit like this. This is approximate size. And at the back of the dog here, I'm just going to click on this individual vertex, and I can either move it using the blue and the red arrow, and I'm just going to push that out. And this one up here, I'm going to bring it down and bring it in. So that makes the back of my dog. I'm now going to begin using edge select. I'm going to, again, B, and I'm just going to drag around this edge. So you can see it's only got one edge selected. And now I can extrude. So if I press E, I can drag that out just like this. And then I might scale it. And I can scale that up to make it bigger. Okay, again, or my other option is I go to vertex select, click the bottom here, and I'm going to just grab. So I can do it with the move tool, or I can press G on my keyboard, grab it, and just move that down. Then I'm going to select that edge again, press extrude, and drag it out. Now we don't want to make too many polygons on this side, so it's just a process of me going through this, clicking on the right points and modifying them as we're going. So edge select again, extrude, and at the moment I'm just making the torso of the dog. I'm not doing the legs, and you'll see why as we move further. So E again, extruding out, vertex select, and pulling this up. One more time, E, extrude out, and click on my vertex select, select the vertexes I want, and I'm just going to free move that one, grab this one and move that in a bit. Now our next step is to take this shape upwards. So there's a couple of different ways I could do this. I'm going to do it with edge select. I'm going to select multiple edges. I'm going to pick all those, go E, you'll see they all come up at once. Now I'm going to click at this point, and then I'm actually going to scale them in, like this. Now this one's still sticking quite a far away off the body, so what I'll do is grab the individual vertex, click on this point, drag it in, and I might just move the individual ones around. But again, as you can see, I'm just going to flick to solid mode. I'm starting to make the body of the dog. So I'm going to go back to my wireframe, make sure I'm in the Y view so that when I extrude it upwards, it only goes up vertically. So again, I'm going to select the edges that I want to pick. So holding shift and clicking, and click multiple edges, extrude, go up, and I'm going to scale this in again as we're going, but I'll adjust the individual vertices just by clicking on it, and I might drag that one back out again. The other option to quicker select this edge here is edge select, and if I hold Alt, it selects that whole loop, so all the whole cut across. So going up again, and you might get to a point where you don't need every one of these cubes. So I'll move that one in, and this one I might move into here. So after this point, I'm no longer going to extrude that section there. So with my edge select now, grab this one, across here, E, and drag up. Then E again, I'm going to drag that up to near the top of the dog. Get my vertices, move that one in. And up here again, just selecting this. And it's a bit of free, you'll get to play with it a bit. There is no exact right or wrong way to do this. So E, drag it up. And your mesh might be slightly different to mine, and that's completely okay. So now I'm going to start making the rounded head. Now there's also a reason why I'm not making the ears yet, because you'll find the ears will be extruded differently from the top of the head afterwards. Alright, so I've got my rough shape there. I'm now going to extrude out the front. So I'm going to grab my edges again and extrude outwards. Now you might look at that and go, oh, that's not going to work because I've got this big gap here. So what I could instead do is if I press Ctrl R and get my box, and I'll do this with solid mode turned on, I'm going to do a loop cut. So I'm going to do a loop cut in this one. So I click when I've got it the right direction, and then I can move it. So I want it to cut there. You might also add another one down here, and I'm going to add it where the bottom of the jaw is. So now if I go back to my wireframe and select these two edges, and just extrude those two, it's a bit narrower. I can grab my vertices and move this one up here. Edge select again. Cool. Now, say I've just grabbed one like this, and I wanted to fill this space in here. What I could do is grab this vertice, and this time, what I can do, if I select these three vertices, and come up to the top here where it says vertex, I can do some different things. Now, I don't want to extrude or bevel any of those, so an edges isn't really going to work for me. What I want to go to is face and fill. Now, it won't necessarily fill here, it'll be going, oh, something's not working. So we might need a fourth edge. So you can create a new face or vertices from the vertexes by pressing F on your keyboard, and it will fill that gap. So I've just filled it there, and then I can free to play with my shape a bit more. Now this time, edge select, click on this one, I'm going to extrude it one last time, click where I want it to finish and scale it down, just using my scale key, so S, and moving my mouse. Then I'll grab these last two vertices, and I'm just going to move this one up, and grab this one here, and move this one roughly here. So you'll see we've got the approximate outline of our body. Now, once we've done this, we're going to add some thickness to our dog. So we're going to go to face select, and I'm going to select all the faces. So I could hold shift and click on them. Now at the moment, because there's only just faces here, and I know it's all in one plane only, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the A key, and it will select every face that's currently there. I'm going to rotate around a bit so I can see it on an angle, and I'm going to hit E on my keyboard. I'm just going to extrude it out about this far off the object. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to mirror this so that it builds two parts to the dog at once. So to do that, I need to delete the backside faces. So if I go back into edit mode, like here, and this time I'm going to select just the faces on the inside. You can do this holding shift, just clicking on all your faces here. And this time I just want to delete the faces. So if I hit X on my keyboard, and that brings up my delete options, and I'm going to go faces only. So what I've essentially created is a hollow in my shape. Alright. Now, next step, we're going to go back into object mode and apply a modifier. So what modifiers do is they allow you to perform different things with your shape. Now in this case, we're going to add a mirror. So what the mirror's done is it mirrors what I currently have there. Now at the moment, it's not mirroring it in the right axis. It's mirroring it on the x-axis, which we don't want. I actually want it to mirror on the z, and you'll see that it mirrors that object there. Now one thing to look at, we don't want to hit apply at all, because if I hit apply, it'll stop doing the mirror. Now if I move my object, you'll see it now moves. But if I go back into edit mode and select my object and move it, you'll see I can move it apart. But what we've got to be careful is if we don't cross them over. So you'll see it'll overlap. If I move it too far apart, it looks a bit weird. So we're going to pull it apart a bit. And what we're going to do is turn on clipping. What that means is any two faces that touch in this middle section, it will join together. So in edit mode, I'm going to deselect my shape and I'm going to go to edge select and hold Alt and click on this inside edge. And that selects that whole internal edge at once. And just with my move tool or pressing G on the keyboard, I'm just going to move that in. Now I'm going to do it with the move tool because I just want to move it on the green plane. And now you'll notice it actually clips together and it doesn't go past. Alright, so now I'm starting to get what looks like my dog. So I've got my body shape here, and I'm going to start with doing the ears up the top. So looking at that, I know my ears won't touch in the middle, because if I just turn back to the front view, you'll see they're separate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a loop cut to divide this thickness. So if I press Ctrl R, and I want the loop cut to be in this plane, and I want it to be fairly close to the outside. So now I have, when I go to face select, some more faces to pick. And to do my ear, I'm going to select these two faces on the back ear. And then I'm going to change back to front view. Now I've actually probably will need more faces. I'm going to grab this one as well. Change back to front view and press my E for extrude and drag them up. Now what you'll see is when it's now left that gap in the middle, and it's also, you can see, mirroring my actions on the object behind. Now this is where it can get a bit tricky, because if I go to scale, I can really screw it up. So this is where you're really going to change between using your wireframe and making sure X-ray is turned on, because what that does is when you go to drag select, it allows you to pick the backwards edges, because you now have a 3D object as opposed to just a single plane. So if I go into my Y view, I'm now going to start to shape this. So to do, keeping it exactly in that Y view, if I, with X-ray turned on, if I select just with a edge mode and press B and drag select, it'll select the front and the back edge. So I want to select the front and the back vertices here. So I'm going to grab this vertex here, so with B, and drag around this one. Now you'll notice, as I said, it's selected both the front and the back vertex on that 3D model. So if I go to move it, it moves them together. If I only had one selected, what happens, and you'll notice this in your front view, if I move it, you'll see that back corner is there and I start to distort my object out of proportion. So doing this, how I can continue to modify my shape. So I might change between face select, so I'm going to select this top face and this one, go back to my Y, front on, extrude, and pull those up. I'm also going to scale them in a bit, and I'm going to use my vertices select, and I'm going to make sure I do the drag select so that I select the front and back vertice, and then I can move it and start to shape my object. So again, you can see it can be a bit tricky at times. I'm going to grab these two together, so it's grabbing about 4. and drag those in. I'm going to rotate back to the top, change to my face view, and I'm just going to turn off onto solid so you can see, and select these two. Go back to wireframe, go back to my front view, and extrude those up. And again, just playing with my different shapes, I'm going to, in that Y view, play with using the vertices select and grabbing different vertices. So I'm going to grab this one, drag it right in, and grab these two and drag that right in. And I'm actually going to finish that one there. Not really going to extrude that any further. And I'm just going to move that. And you can see there I didn't grab both of them. So make sure I'm doing B, grabs both, and I'm going to move that there. I'm going to rotate back to the top and just grab the top face. Click back on Y, extrude up towards the top. And my last move will be vertices select, press B, select that edge, and I'm going to drag that one into there. So I've got quite a pointed ear. And you might be like, what about these random stuff happening at the back? And this is where I can go back and edit my shape a bit more. So I'm going to use B, and I'm going to click this one here and drag that one in. And B again, click this one. I'm actually going to drag it to about there. Oh, now you can see something weird happen. When I went to do my move down here, I had extra one selected at the top. So make sure you deselect by clicking off. Again, click this one, drag it in, and I'm going to click this one, drag it up here, and select this one, and I'm going to drag it down here. So if I go back into solid mode, you'll see that I'm now starting to get that three-dimensional looking figure. Now for the tail, again, you can add in another loop cut. This is where I'm going to skip ahead a bit and show you my finished side view model, just to keep the tutorial a bit shorter. So turning off the visibility of these two, and I'm going to flick on my pre-prepared ones. So you'll see my side profile dog in my collection too, and my reference image. Now to do the legs, because the legs are a bit harder, if I turn off the X-ray, you can see again I made loop cuts to split the body and drag them downwards. Now you'll notice once we finish with that 2D view, the legs look quite skinny, and so does the rest of the body. So once we get to this point, and you can see what I also did is when I was modeling, I actually at one stage grabbed the faces of my object. So just the faces. This is where I need to make sure I've got my right object selected. In edit mode, you can see with the faces, I grab the individual faces and press extrude and drag just the right faces out to make it a bit thicker. So you can see that was my side profile dog. So I shaped the legs doing the same method I did for the head. Each leg is exactly the same. And you'll see my mirror modifier is still existing. Now, once I got to this finished stage, I go back into object mode. With my reference image on, you'll notice we've matched the two, like the side profile, but that doesn't necessarily look like my dog over here. So what I'm going to do to my object now is I'm going to rotate it. And the easiest way to do that is to bring up in my object mode with the transform toolbar open, and you can see I can rotate in the different planes. So I'm going to rotate it about Z, and I want to rotate it 90 degrees. Now my dog is front on. And if I move my move tools now, I can now move it across, and if I'm in Y, I want to move it to approximately the center of my object here. Now if I go back into edit mode, this is where I can play around a bit more. And we're going to play with using edge selects and moving and grabbing the objects to shape it. So if I look straight on, I'm going to start with the ears, and my ears need to be, and head need to be a bit fatter. So I might grab with face, and I'm going to shift and just grab a bunch of these faces, so most of the face. Oh, and make sure you're not grabbing the faces on the top, because we only want to grab the ones that we're going to pull out to the side. So I'll go back and do that again, because I accidentally hit Alt. I'm even going to grab the side of the ears here and change back to my front view. Now if I press G on my keyboard or just use the move tool, I can start to stretch my face out. Now I'm only doing this bit at a time, because once I've stretched the face out, I'm going to play with the angles. And to move individual parts in, I'm now going to use edge select. So what I can do is start to round my face. So I don't want to have everything selected, so I might go, oh, I want the snout to be a bit rounder. So I'm going to select this bits of the snout, and a combination of using my edges, so I'm going to drag that bit in. And I might grab individual vertices and start to shape using those. So I might make the front of the nose right in. And I'm going to start to shape it in 3 dimensions. So you might go, oh, the nose isn't going to be as pointy at the end. So this needs to come in a bit. And through playing with it, I can start to narrow the face back down to what a dog's face might actually look like. Now this is low poly, so it's not going to look exactly round, but we can start to shape our dog a bit better. So you can see I've now got a narrowed snout, and I might keep my cheekbones a bit wider. And this is where if you're finding you haven't got enough points to play with, you could add in another loop cut. And at the back of the head, I might actually push that in a bit. So with that, I've started to make, and I'm just going to go back to solid mode so you can see it, and turn off my reference image. I've started to round the head a bit, so it's looking a bit more like the profile of a dog. Now using those exact same tools, so just being in edit mode and playing with your edges and your face select and pulling them in and out or extruding them out further, you're going to get to the point where you have a more finished looking dog. So I'll change the solid view so you can see here and turn on X-ray, or just leave it so you can see, but I started to shape my dog to look more like the reference image. So I've pulled out parts of the body and shaped all the parts of his body so he's looking a bit wider and a bit chunkier. And I haven't allowed for eyes. Now the tricky bit is also at the back. So you can see at the back I've actually pushed some features in to give it kind of the broad round body that a dog has. Now once you get to this stage and shaping your animal, because it will take some time, it's not something quick, and by no means is this completely finished, what you're going to add in is a reference plane. So we're going to turn off the reference image, and I'm going to add a plane in underneath. Now once I've got that there, I'm just simply going to go into my materials view, and like last week I've just added some basic materials. So with my object selected in object mode, I added a brown base color, and to the plane I added a blue base color and put a metallic finish on it with a black reflection. And if I now go into my render mode, you can see it's quite dark, and that's because I don't currently have any lights in there. So I'm going to add in a light. I'm just going to make this a sun and move it up. So add in a point. Sorry, Just going to go back to object mode so I can see it. So where's my light? So in collection 2, add a light. There it is. And I'm going to move it up and move it across. I'm just going to put it above my dog, and then I can go back into my render mode. I'm going to change this to a sun. The sun's a lot brighter, and you'll see that's what my dog's looking like. Once you get to that point, I'd like you to save your render file, because in our lessons next week, we're going to look at adding some different materials to it. Now, as a challenge, you could possibly look at doing another animal as well. So you have two. So you might have the dog and another animal. Now, to find a reference image, I simply went to Google and typed animal orthographic or animal side view. And you want to find a reference image where you can see the animal from the side and the front view, and they're in the same position. Okay, so you might try the dog, and then you might try another animal in the same plane. And you can just send me a screen clipping of you getting up to this stage and submit the screen clipping. So all you need to do that is either print screen on your keyboard or use a clipping tool and show me that you've got up to this point, because we're going to use this file the following week and start playing with some different materials and textures and how you apply them to different objects to cause different effects. All right, thanks again.